After independence in 1963, the lucky man to hold the position of finance minister in independent Kenya was James Gishuru, who served for 6 years until 1969. During this time, Kenya recorded rapid economic growth through public investment, encouragement of smallholder agricultural production, and incentives for private industrial investment. The rallying call then by the first president of Kenya, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, was to rudi mashambani, get back to the farms.
Mimi nimekwisha sema habari ya ardhi, habari ya mashamba, nikiangalia habari ya makazi yenye mishahara minono iko mikononi mwa wananchi. Kweli urongo? Kweli urongo?
This was because Kenya's economy at that time was agriculture-based, and that, in order to deal with enemy number one, hunger and malnutrition, food security was the rallying call. The gross domestic product, GDP, grew at an annual average of 6.6%. Come 1969, the budget-making portfolio was given to Mwai Kibaki, who served until 1982. However, during his time, the economy that had grown by 6.6% had a shake-up, beginning 1974 all the way to 1990, declining from 6.6% to 4.7%.
A basis which makes it possible for 2 or 3 or 4 of you in a town or in a region to get together and say, well, we are in this thing together. We either hang together, or as the saying is, we hang separately.
This was attributed to Kenya's inward-looking policy of import substitution and rising oil prices that made Kenya's manufacturing sector uncompetitive. This was also the time when price controls were the norm, coupled by the Cold War era of the West versus the East that worsened matters for the economy. In came Arthur Kinyanjui Magugu in 1982. Magugu is best remembered for delivering the budget late. He served until 1988. Perhaps the change of guard was informed by the sharp decline in the economy, and the thinking then was that Magugu would show up an otherwise sharply declining economy due to lack of export incentives, tight import controls, and foreign exchange controls that continue to make the domestic environment for investment even less attractive. To make matters worse for the minister, his assistant minister Daniel Moss, the then MP for Mount Elgon, shocked the country when he came out with a startling revelation that the budget had been leaked. This coming at a time when budget making was top government secret. Moss paid dearly, as he was promptly fired as assistant minister on the day that the budget was read. Exit Magugu, and in came Professor George Saitoti, who took over the mantle of running the Kenyan economy in 1983.
Amounts involved, as measured in potential foreign exchange earnings or employment opportunities, are still modest. But it is clear that the investment climate is changing as a result of our efforts to simplify our procedures.
He served until 1992 when he lost the position to Wycliffe Musalia Mudavadi. During his watch, between 1991 and 1993, Kenya had its worst economic performance since independence. Bilateral and multilateral donors suspended aid to Kenya in 1991. Growth in GDP stagnated, and agricultural production shrank at an annual rate of 3.9%, with inflation reaching a record 100% in August of 1993. The musical chair switched once again. As Mudavadi took charge of the ailing economy with a budget deficit of 10% of GDP to boot. Mudavadi served in the finance docket between 1993 to 1997. In 1993, the Goldenberg fiasco reared its head as the exchange rate spiraled and the Kenyan shilling got a thorough beating.
Order now.
Mudavadi began a major program of economic reform and liberalization. A series of austerity economic measures with the assistance of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund (IMF) was undertaken. These included elimination of price controls and import licensing, removal of foreign exchange controls, privatization of publicly owned companies, reduction of the number of civil servants under the Structural Adjustment Program, and the introduction of conservative fiscal and monetary policies. Even then, between 1994 to 1996, Kenya's real GDP growth rate averaged just over 4%, and the economy remained on the deathbed. It was this economic quagmire that greeted Simeon Nyachae, who took over in 1998, and during an economic conference at the Kenya College of Communications Technology, KCCT, currently Multimedia University, and attended by then-President Daniel Arap Moi, Nyachae made the bold declaration to the effect that the Kenyan economy was in the intensive care unit, ICU.
To privatize in the process at a time when Kenyans don't have the money. In other words, you want to hand over what has been built over the years through the taxpayers' money. Now you want to hand it over to some foreigners.
Nyachae did not last at the Ministry of Finance, thereafter becoming the first finance minister to resign, and was immediately replaced by Yekoyada Francis Omoto Masahalia, who ended up being the shortest-serving finance minister in Kenyan history, only serving 6 months between February 1999 to August 1999. The finance portfolio was then given to Chrysanthus Barnabas Okemo to help deal with the tattered economy.
For him to say Koech Commission will be implemented even by stages, because maybe the cost of it cannot be implemented at once. But it is not as expensive as it has been pretended.
Serving from September 1999 to November 2001. At this time, the economy kept on relapsing, with the clamor for a new constitution gaining momentum.
A number of cases have been brought before the courts for prosecution, and many more are currently under investigation. We are taking a multidisciplinary approach in tackling corruption.
Christopher Obure then took over in November 2001 and served 1 year to December 2002. In came Daudi Mwiraria after the opposition finally came to power through the National Rainbow Coalition (NAC) in January 2003 and served until 2006 when he was ejected from office during the Anglo leasing scandal, in which the government was accused of complicity in corruption, coupled by the issuance of promissory notes to non-existent supply companies.
As far as the Ministry of Finance is concerned, the money was received because it was sent to that account that we were given by the Attorney General.
His exit paved way for Amos Kimunya in February 2006 and served until 2008, when he too was forced out over the so-called Grand Regency Hotel saga.
This is the time for him to also step aside as Kimunya is being kicked out, so that we can have free access to the records of the central bank. To stop corruption at the treasury, Kimunya must go. To redress Kenyans who were conned into buying into the IPO of Safaricom, Kimunya must go. Mr. Speaker, to assure Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, to assure Kenyans that their taxes are reserved for development, Kimunya must go. I beg to move, and I ask Honorable Namwamba to second me. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, as I sit down, I beg that when we make a decision on this, it should be by nothing else but the division, so that Wananchi should know how we are voting.
John Michuki took over in a temporary capacity, serving from 2008 to 2009, when a substantive Minister of Finance and current President Uhuru Kenyatta took over at Treasury in 2009 and served until 2011, when again the ICC matter came calling and had Uhuru relinquish his position as Finance Minister to Njeru Githai. But this was not without the biggest shocker of a budget that crossed the billion shillings mark into trillion shillings. He actually presented the country with a 1.1 trillion budget for the financial year 2011 to 2012, making Kenya the largest economy in East Africa.
We are presenting to Parliament the first ever Kenya shillings 1.155 trillion budget, the largest indeed in the history of this country.
But this was not the only major change to budget making in the country. Uhuru's tenure marked the opening of the budget making process to the public participation and scrutiny. Following the promulgation of the Constitution, a budget-making committee was formed and went round the country seeking public input in the budget before the presentation was made as a formality. The same again happened in the 2012 to 2013 budget, in which Njeru Githai upped the budget, presenting Kenya with a 1.45 trillion shillings budget against a revenue collection of 1.108 trillion shillings, giving an overall deficit of 279 billion shillings.
We are going to take advantage of the new constitution, which actually authorizes us every 2 months to prepare a supplementary budget. But we will not be doing 2 months, we'll be doing it on quarterly basis.
Come 2013, and the country has a cabinet secretary at Treasury in place of a finance minister. Henry Rotich will today present the country with the ever-rising budget estimate of 1.64 trillion shillings. For the Budget in History, I'm Judith Akolo.